Well, aloha and good morning to all of you tuning in here to the platforms of the Honolulu Star Advertiser. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joined, of course, by Yanji Denise. This is the COVID-19 Care Conversation brought to you by Hawaii Pacific Health and the Hawaii Executive Collaborative. And today, Yanji, we have a special guest that will be joining us in just a few moments.
Yeah, he's on the front page of today's paper, and he is always a new newsmaker. We are going to be joined by Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell. We know a lot of you have questions for him. Something big happening tomorrow is that a bunch of places that were considered medium to high risk will be allowed to reopen. We're talking about gyms, movie theaters, bars, things like that. So we'll be asking about his possible concerns with the reopening of that and how the city is looking at that rollout. And of course, the big news today, Ryan, is the budget.
That's why we're going to talk to him about how the overall impact of COVID-19 is impacting the city budget and how services and how the city will continue to provide these services for its constituents. We're excited to talk to him and get an update from him, especially on that very important issue. One of the areas that, of course, the economic sides of this pandemic has certainly been far-reaching, and we'd like to get an update with some of that that is happening right now. Of course, we'd like to always start off by giving you an update on the latest counts. And as of noon on Wednesday, 4 new cases were reported. One was actually removed. So the overall total for the state of Hawaii of positive COVID cases is now at 740 positive cases. And really, Yanji, we're continuing to see throughout the country these numbers continuing to rise in some of these other states. Hawaii's numbers, again, continue to sort of fluctuate. We saw those big numbers over the weekend as things began reopening. And of course, that is something that we also want to talk to the mayor about. Are these continuing rises in these other cases? We see the mayor right now. We're going to bring him into the live stream. Joining us from Honolulu Hale, of course, is Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell. Mayor, can you hear us right now? I'm not sure the mayor
I'm
can.
not sure he can. We're going to have to get him.
Hey, folks, how's it going?
Okay, great.
Can you hear me okay?
We hear you just fine. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's dive right in. First of all, how are you feeling about how Hawaii and Honolulu in particular is doing when it comes to this? We've seen some cases now at some nursing facilities, and of course that's cause for concern. But overall, what's the pulse of the city from your perspective?
Well, it is concerning. A couple things are concerning. One, as you've seen, we've had an uptick in the number of cases in Oahu. I think we're going to see another uptick today. I'm hearing up to 18 new cases. And so it is concerning as the mayor of this island and in terms of how it's being managed. We know it's open up both airline travel and, of course, as we open up our economy generally, and by Friday, almost everything's going to be opened up in one manner or another, except for large gatherings. We're going to see an uptick. But how do we manage it is critical. Department of Health has assured me repeatedly in my pushing that they have capacity in both testing, contact tracing, quarantine, and then support, right, if someone is quarantined. And yet we do see these outbreaks in clusters, including in care homes, which is troubling. And that if we're on it, if the department is on it in terms of tracing where the virus is spreading, they should be able to find where it's gone and to keep it from spreading. And so in case of one care home now, we have a staffer plus multiple people having been tested positive, which means there's community spread within the care home, and it should be stopped. In fact, these kind of things need to happen if we're going to open up inside this void, because when this comes, the virus will travel, more people will get sick, and we've looked at numbers as high as maybe 50 cases a day as we open up outside of Hawaii type travel, and that we've been assured we can handle if you have the sufficient number of contact tracers. And Department of Health is working on a contract with the University of Hawaii to get up to 250 to 300 folks on board. My opinion is they should be on board already. My opinion is they should be on board and tested themselves, to not tested for the virus, but tested that they're ready to respond. But yet we have this smoldering issue right now among the Chukis community, where we have spread in different populations of Chukis and different housing projects. And it's been like this for about a month and a half. And if we were really on it, in my opinion, we would have found where it was, contact traced, isolated, supported, and kept that spread from continuing, but yet we still see it. Troubling to me.
You know, Mayor, we're having a little bit of some glitches on your end, so I'm going to just maybe ask if you and your team can maybe just refresh the screen and then come back. We'll bring you right back in. So I think if we can just reset on your end, and then we'll try this again. We're just getting a little bit of a breakup, and I think we can try to get a better signal. So we'll join the mayor once again really quickly once they're able to sort of refresh on their end and hopefully get back so we can get some better audio. But already some interesting notes that the mayor is speaking to us about directly.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that we need stronger contact tracing, and him obviously expressing some trepidation when it comes to the number of cases. He said he's hearing as high as 18 today. That would be very high, a lot higher than we're used to seeing. Like we said, 4 just yesterday. So we're excited to ask the mayor more questions. David Murray says, thanks for having a forum where the public might be able to share and ask the leadership questions directly. Please type your questions into the comments right now. As the mayor resets his computer, we are going to be asking him as many of these questions as possible. We see Lake Maddow on here every day asking when the out-of-state travel will reopen. We'll be asking him about his comfort level with that. Of course, that's a state decision, not necessarily a city decision, but it does impact the city very directly.
And I think that we do have him back. I'm not sure that it's better, unfortunately, but we will give it a go here and see if that works better. And hopefully it does. Can we? And that's the beauty of going live here is to sort of deal with some of the technical.
You are breaking up again, Yunji and Ryan, so I don't know if it's working or not.
I hear you just fine. So
am I coming through
no,
clear?
you're
still breaking
loud
up.
And clear to us. So hopefully you can hear us. Why don't we throw some
okay. You break up. I kind of get the gist. I get the gist of your question, but I have to say it's but I get you're talking about testing a number of cases. So I'm winging it a bit. So
okay.
I worry that if it's happening with you, to me, is it going to happen? Because it worked in the beginning, right? And then I started breaking up.
Got it. Okay. We sound okay right now on your end. So we're just going to say the word opening restaurants and bars. Hopefully you can hear that. We want your thoughts on bars and gyms that are opening tomorrow.
Okay. So tomorrow's a big day for bars and gyms, and also movie theaters and museums. And in fact, tomorrow I'm going to be over at Iolani Palace visiting the museum there and encouraging local folks to come down and see an incredible, only palace in the United States. And so we're celebrating the opening up. But yes, tomorrow, bars and gyms, and it's incumbent on everyone who goes to a bar or a gym that they follow all the protocols and guidelines. And the very first one is wearing a facial covering as you go in and as you leave both of these places, and to keep it on as much as possible until you're either sitting down and having a beer or actually lifting weights and breathing hard. But keeping your face coverings on for as long as possible is a way to protect yourself, but it also protects everyone else around you. And so that's critical. And then practicing good physical distancing in both places. Again, you're required to be apart unless you're part of a family unit. And so this is critical. And we can continue to open up. And we've taken I believe, some risk here, opening up bars and gyms in particular. But it's now incumbent on those who are going into these places to set that discipline themselves. In the case of bars, part of why I was more willing to open up bars is we got confirmation from our liquor commission that inspectors, when they go into bars, as they do all the time to make sure you're not serving to underage folks and that kind of thing, that they're going to be watching and making sure that those at bars are practicing physical distancing, that there is no risk taking. And if there is, they could be called into a procedure before the liquor commission where their liquor license could be suspended or revoked, which would have huge economic consequences. So I hope bar owners around the island of Oahu take this opening up very seriously and take all action to protect their customers and their employees from the virus, which is out there spreading.
We want to bring in some viewer questions. Regine Dela Cruz says, as more businesses are opening up and having new cases daily, is there a plan to close it again? What's your threshold for having to pull back from some of these openings?
Well, my hope as the mayor, is I hope we don't have to go backwards and close again. You know, so much sacrifice has been made, both personally and financially, into billions and billions and billions of dollars. And to now retreat backwards would be very difficult. And there's not going to be those billions of additional dollars coming from the federal government or state and local government. So it's really important that we hold the line. And that means that people need to practice and be careful. Everyone, from the restaurant owner, the gym owner, the manager, the patron in a bar, the bartender, everyone needs to make sure they're doing everything possible. And we know that there will be more cases. It doesn't mean that we need to retreat because there's more cases. It means, how do we manage those cases? And it is all the conditions. Do we have enough hospital units, ICU units? Do we have enough personal protection equipment? Do we have enough healthcare providers? And all of those things. And right now, we have all of those in surplus. And so we're okay there. The next thing is the Department of Health ready for an increased number of cases to contact trace, because as people get the virus, they need to be immediately, within hours, tracing where people went and contacting those folks, and if need be, get them tested and then have them isolated and supported if they're positive. If we do this, we can continue to open up and not have to retreat. Cities like Incheon, South Korea, a city of 3 million, Seoul, a city of almost 20 million, have stayed open the whole time, but they've been very, very aggressive on the testing, contact tracing, and isolation. And so I think that's where the focus is. Some of it is within our control at the city, but much of it is in the control of the Department of Health.
One of the questions that, again, hopefully you can hear us, is about the budget that went through yesterday. Obviously, the overall city budget has been impacted by this, this outbreak and the pandemic overall. What are your thoughts, and what can you tell us about the overall operating budget of the city moving forward in these conditions that we are in?
Well, one thing I do want to mention to all your viewers is that, I think the Honolulu City Council did an incredible job in the very height of the pandemic. As you know, we submitted our budget on March 2nd, right as the pandemic was heating up in the United States. And on the 23rd of March, we entered our order that shut down Oahu before the state even did. And yet the council continued to work through this entire period of time on our budget. They didn't close down. They didn't run from their duties. They took them very seriously and advanced the budget forward. So we actually have a budget that I could get out yesterday. And it's a budget that is, I think, fiscally responsible to the conditions we face today. As you know, unlike the state, the city does core services like police and fire and emergency management, EMS, all of those guys, sewer, water. And if those things are not operating up to par every day, all of us, all of you, feel the impacts immediately. And so this budget continues to do that. And where focus was really placed was on first responders. In fact, places like the Honolulu Police Department, because prior to the pandemic, we were seeing a spike in crime, and the public was demanding more support for the police department, and we supported putting an additional $8 million into their budget, which the council passed. And I really appreciate it. In this defunding discussion, in our case, I think supporting our police officers to protect all of us is really important. So first responders, their budgets are strong and in place to make sure they can do their job. But the other thing we did is we were careful planning for the future, even after my time, because our term ends at the end of December. New mayor coming in, a new council. There was real pressure placed on us, for example, by the visitor industry, where they wanted us to forgive all real property taxes for the next half a year for hotels and resorts in Waikiki. And it would have been in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. That would have been just lost revenue that wouldn't have been picked up by anyone else. And we couldn't provide the core services if we did that. And then we also heard requests from other property classifications, even single family residential, where we live. Could you lower the tax rate? Could you not allow them to pay taxes? It would have been politically popular for me to do that, by the way, to say we're going to give people a break, lower the tax rate. And I would have left my term. Maybe people say, thank you, Mayor, for what you did. but the result would be felt by the next mayor and the next council almost immediately. Reduced revenue, dramatic reduction in revenue, and they wouldn't have the funds necessary to continue to pay our first responders and others. So what we did instead is we held the line, but we're giving all taxpayers in all classifications, even hotel and resorts, the ability to pay their next installment over 4 installments, equal installments between August and November. So they can spread it out and come up with the funds to do so. We'll see how it works. Perhaps the new mayor, new council will support doing that going forward. But it's a way to lessen the pain, but still make sure that our fiscal situation is strong. We cannot afford to lose revenue, and our main income stream is real property tax, and continue to deliver the type of services that people demand and expect here on the island of Oahu.
Well, you made reference to the fact that there will be a new mayor. And so Troy Moy says, what mayoral candidate do you feel would be best qualified to finish the rail project? Do you want to make a little news with us today and endorse someone for your job?
Well, what if I did that, be violating our code of ethics, sitting here in a city facility talking about politics. So I'm gonna take a pass on that. We can talk about it outside, but I'll say this much. I think all the candidates running, the main name candidates, I can't speak for all 15, but the top candidates are the top folks in all the polls, I believe are all passionate about our rail project. They understand how important it is to how we live on this very small island in the future, long-term future. If we're going to continue to grow and build more affordable housing in the urban core where infrastructure already is in place, so you don't have to build new infrastructure, but it costs a lot more, that rail is a key component of it. And so I believe they will continue to support the project, and that is my hope. And I think it's incumbent on whoever gets elected, both as mayor and council, that they complete the first 20 miles to Ala Moana, and then start the discussions about how you get up to UH Manoa and how you go more to the west side into downtown Kapolei and even further out towards the west side. But thanks for that question.
Mayor, of course, Mayor, this is
good try.
Mayor, this is a very challenging time for any public official. I mean, you look at, of course, having to deal with this pandemic, and now, we're seeing just the uprising of people and demonstrations concerning police brutality, concerning the force in which police are using throughout the country. So this is another thing that is, of course, being brought to the forefront. We haven't really seen some of that maybe here in Honolulu specifically, but if you can speak to sort of the calls, you mentioned briefly earlier the defunding of police and that movement that is moving around the country. What are your overall thoughts on the way in which police enforcement and sort of this push for overall change and a revamping of the way in the justice system is handled? What are your thoughts about how it specifically relates to the officers here in Honolulu?
Well, as I answer that question, I want to start broad. I do want to say the Black Lives Matter movement, protests, marches across our country and around the world are extremely important, and I support those. And the systemic racism that exists in our country is not immune here in Hawaii either. We do have examples of systemic racism here in different levels and categories. And we all need to work to be better. And the marching, the protesting is a call on all of us to be better. And, even our daughter has marched a few times. She went to the Women's March this past weekend. And in that picture, by the way, in the Honolulu Star Advertiser, your paper, it showed almost all the folks, mainly women, wearing facial coverings. So I was really happy to see that. They made their voices heard, but they did it in a way where they protected each other and the broader community. And I hope those kinds of marches and protests continue under those types of conditions. Now, in City County of Honolulu, I do believe that our Honolulu Police Department and the men and women who work there, come from our community. They don't commute from outside of Honolulu, from one area into the urban core. They come from all parts of this small, densely populated island, and they look like all of us on our screen right now. They're a blend of many different colors, and they represent our community. They cry like our community does. They feel pain like our community does. They step up as a community, and they protect ourselves. And Chief Ballard, as I said before, when she came in, she told me, Mayor, I'm going to change the mentality of the Honolulu Police Department from being a warrior class to a guardian class. And I think she's done that. And you can see it in the types of actions that her force has taken. And you've seen her even personally in examples. For example, when these two officers forced a homeless person to lick the urinal in one of our public parks, she actually reported the case to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As much as I'm sure she, was concerned about the officer, she did what she felt was correct in an open and transparent way. And this is just a small example of being a guardian. She's not defending in every case. She's saying if there's cases that need to be disclosed and reported, that it should happen. And so I think she's a critical change agent in the Honolulu Police Department. And I look forward to her continuing to lead. And as you hear her talk, she's open to review of things like excessive use of force. She's committed a committee to review that. She will follow the law if the law is changed that that the police department must report all disciplinary actions to the state legislature. She will follow that law, and I in fact told her earlier this week that I'd be submitting a letter to the legislature as mayor supporting moving that law, that bill forward. It's in conference committee right now that would require reporting of officers' conduct. I think that's important to have the public know what the record is. And you think about the fact if that existed in Minneapolis, you wouldn't have probably had this gentleman who put his knee on George Floyd's neck. It wouldn't have happened because he had just so many cases of misconduct. He probably would have been terminated. It's a way to protect. It's another way to be open and transparent. And she said she would follow such a change in the law. So, but to defund, I think is something that would have a very negative impact on our island because of the type of crime we're seeing. And in fact, we need more beat officers in our neighborhoods, like in the old days where they walked around, you knew who they were, they knew who you were, you became friends with them, they understood the community. And we need to go back to that more in places like Chinatown, in places like Kalihi, in places like Waikiki, Manoa, where I live, neighbors saying, why can't we go back to that? And that means actual more funding. The last thing is, our Honolulu Police Department is dealing with issues they really shouldn't. The issue of homelessness. They come up with the HONU program, now the POST program, and many others. They are taking on a challenge that really should be addressed at the state level. The City County of Honolulu does not have a Department of Health. We do not have a Department of Community Services. And we do not have a department that deals with human services, like they have a Department of Human Services at the state. They are the ones who should be dealing with issues like mental illness, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. And in the old days they did, but under Governor Lingel's watch, when I was at the state legislature, she cut dramatically mental health funding. And that, we see the result. If you come with me right now in my car, and we drive around Chinatown, down Nimitz, or down Dillingham, you'll see folks that cannot take care of themselves because of mental challenges and addiction to drugs and alcohol. And they need to be brought in and taken care of. It's not in our silo at the city and county, but the Honolulu Police Department is dealing with some of it and the outcomes. And what should happen is funding should be dedicated to this at a state level to address this issue and not expected to be picked up by the police department. They're doing their part with the support of the city and county of Honolulu, but more needs to be done at a state level to address these challenges.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about small businesses. You put $25 million made available now for small businesses on Oahu. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program, where you hope that money goes, and who you're trying to help?
Okay, so we have the City County of Honolulu got about $400 million from the United States Department of Treasury, directly paid to the City and County of Honolulu to address the impacts of COVID-19. It worked as any city over $500,000 got money directly, and cities under, the other counties, it was given to the state, and then the state pays it over to the other counties. So we got ours directly. And last month in May, we announced a program, the first $25 million to be provided to small businesses up to $10,000 grants. In other words, free money. You just had to show what you were spending it on, and then you would get the money to cover those costs. For businesses as they opened up, the City County of Honolulu shut down businesses on March 23rd, and now as we open them up, we require that they have modifications, tables have to be spread further apart, offices have to have plexiglass, and it costs money. And so we said, we'll help cover it through a program that would be administered through credit unions. And we went to credit unions because, one, they're not for profit. Two, they're in our neighborhoods, they deal with all the local folks, and so we thought it would be a way to get the money out. And the program was set up, so $25 million was provided in the first tranche for businesses of 30 employees or less, up to $1 million in revenue that have storefronts. We're trying to help people who had to pay their rent every month in a commercial setting and had to pay their electric bills and those kind of things, and then would have to modify as they open up. Not businesses and homes where you don't have to modify, but ones that would have to. And that program is working very well. And it started last month, and we've given out about 20 of the 25 million, and they say the rest of the money will be out very shortly. And so we decided to put out another 25 million. Now it'll be a total of 50. And we've opened it up to businesses up to 50 employees now, and businesses with $2 million in revenue. And we're opening up to farmers, because farmers they kind of have storefronts too. They have land, they got to work and pay and manage, they got to pay rent and those kind of things on. And so we're hoping we can help our small farmers, and we'll see how it goes. And we're excited. We think the money will probably be all distributed before the end of the summer. And we'll look at maybe more programs in the fall, because we know as PPP runs out, as unemployment insurance runs out, there's going to be more demand. And so we're going to make sure as we spend the money here on Oahu, we spend it in a way that it helps people all the way to the end of December. By the end of December, all this money has to be spent, or it has to be returned to the Department of Treasury. We want to spend it here on Oahu for the business on Oahu and the people of Oahu.
Mayor, our time is coming to an end quickly, but I did want to ask you a question about just reopening the state. Of course, specifically, you are essentially in charge of Oahu and Waikiki tourism, a big part of that. What are your overall thoughts on when Hawaii should be open to out-of-state visitors? And are you comfortable, with that happening sooner as we see these case rises continue to go up? You mentioned today we have 18 cases that will be reported today. Are you comfortable with Hawaii opening up? And what do you foresee that looking like when we do get the green light to do so?
Good question, Ryan. And really, we need to open up to outside visitors, or we're never going to really see our economy warming up to a level where people are getting back to work. So number one, I'm really happy to see inter-island travel open up and no quarantine. It started the day before yesterday, and I'm sure they're still working out some of the problem areas, but it's a test to that next step, which is opening up our airports and ports to visitors from outside of the state. And so I'm glad they've opened. They're working out the kinks. I think they're trying to get the data live and robust and immediate. And once that is done, then I think the next step is opening up to outside visitors. And for me as mayor, I'd like to do it sooner than later. But we need to get the inter-island part resolved first. And then secondly, I think as a mayor responsible for almost 1 million people on Oahu, before we bring visitors in, we need really strong protocols in place. One, you can come in and the quarantine will not apply to you, 14-day quarantine, if you come in with a negative test, COVID-19 test, administered 3 days before you arrive in Hawaii. If you want additional protection, we could require a second test. Once you arrive, you quarantine for 3 days and get a second test. And if that's tested negative again, no quarantine you can go about. Now that's extra precaution. I'm not saying absolutely needs to be done, but I think it needs to be discussed with viewers like yours to see what people think. But definitely one test before. Now, if you show up without the test at the airport, then you need to be tested at the airport. And then you agree to quarantine at your hotel or place of residence, whether you're a visitor or a resident coming in, until your test is analyzed. And if it's negative, you can go about your business. If it's positive, then you have to quarantine in place for 14 days and be supported. So I think those are the basic conditions. I also think that there should be a bill passed that requires visitors coming in to pay an entry fee before they come here, because traveling right now is expensive for the island of Oahu and the state of Hawaii, because we have to administer and manage the visitors coming in during the pandemic. And that fee could go to cover the cost out at the airport for doing testing and having, you know, people there, making sure they're reviewing as you come in. You're gonna have to submit your test result showing it. And this means more people out at the airport than are there now. Taxpayers on Oahu and the state of Hawaii shouldn't pay for it. Should be paid by the visitors who elect to come here right now.
You know, Mayor, this is the first that I've heard anyone talk about this double testing, and this, because usually we hear it sort of all or nothing. We do the 72 hours before you board a flight. I haven't heard of anyone talking about this testing and then a 3-day plan. Is that something that's being discussed anywhere, or is that just something that is an idea that you have? You know, the governor was on here. He said our testing capacity, unfortunately, is just 5,000 per day, which is fine for the residents of Honolulu. But if we add, you know, we had, as you know, upwards of 30,000 people arriving daily before the pandemic. Certainly it won't be there, but I don't know that we have the testing capacity to do that double testing.
You know, Yunji, that's a very good question. As you know, here at the City County of Honolulu, we pushed hard in Department of Health to do more testing. We tried to every well result. We now have agreements with our community health centers, all 7, to do more testing. We have an agreement with the John A. Burns School of Medicine to set up a lab to do more testing. To your point, we need more capacity to test our residents and to also test the visitors who are coming in. And I think we can build to that capacity. Maybe not to 30,000 visitors coming back again. I don't think that's going to happen immediately, but doing testing here on Oahu, or having people being tested outside of the state, is what I'd prefer to see happen. But as you know, right now we've opened up our film industry. Oahu, through the orders that we submitted to the governor, now has a film industry where you can come in from outside the state of Hawaii. You can come in from LA, from Hollywood, and you come in. You have to have a test done 3 days before. You come in, you agree to quarantine in your hotel, have a second test done. If it comes in negative, and most likely it's going to come in negative for almost everyone, you can then do a modified travel. You can go to where you're filming outdoors, but you agree to go back to your hotel at night and quarantine in place. So we have it in for a very small portion of visitors coming into a business sector, the film industry sector. But I think it's something to look at to see how does it work, and can we make it apply broader. I'm not absolutely wedded to a second test, but there are people out there, including those who work in the visitor industry, all of our hotel workers, the folks who live in Waipahu and go to Waikiki, the folks who live in Ewa Beach and go to clean rooms in Waikiki, who are very concerned about going to clean rooms, interface with visitors, and wondering, could you be positive and I get sick and take it home to my kupuna? And so they want this assurance. And so the first level assurance is get tested at least once. A double level insurance is get tested twice. And I think it's something that should be discussed in a setting like yours. Now, we've talked about it a little bit, the mayors and the governor. I've talked about it on the conferences that we have. But we haven't been around the table where decisions are being made on whether to do it. We'd like to be at that. I would like to be at that table to have those discussions.
All right, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell, we thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We apologize for the technical issues, but thank you for bearing with us and surviving through that. Always a pleasure talking to you, and maybe we will see you on Sunday riding your beaky through Waikiki once again. Great to see you again, to catch up, and look forward to it.
Yeah, Ryan, I look forward to seeing you. And Yunji, you got to come with your kids. They're gonna love it. They can ride their bike and be all wiggly, and you don't have to worry about them getting hit by a car.
That sounds fabulous. All right, I'll see you on Sunday.
Thank you, Mayor.
Very interesting, Ryan. First of all, I did not know that the film industry had that kind of special exemption. I don't know if any of our readers knew that or our viewers knew that. But that is a very interesting concept, this sort of modified quarantine where you can come here if you're in a specific sector. I don't know if it extends beyond the film industry. You get that test 3 days before you come here, you get a test, and you're allowed limited, you can go do your job essentially and then come back and finish out the rest of your quarantine. That's an innovative idea. I haven't heard it elsewhere. And he's right. There are a lot of hotel workers and other people in our community. You don't necessarily have to work in Waikiki to be concerned concerned about visitors coming from some of these states where we see, the numbers going up, California, Arizona, among others.
That's right. And also interesting, his idea of potentially having some sort of, maybe it's a COVID bill that gets passed, a COVID fee that gets extended to those travelers to come in to help offset some of the costs. Because when you think about it, he's saying the amount of cost of the city as well as the state is going to have to put forth in order to have some of these testing. He's saying that the city and the state should not be responsible for bearing that cost, and that potentially that cost should be passed along to those who are arriving. So we'll see if something like that happens. We know that the legislature is heading back into session next week to sort of address some of these issues in terms of funding and rules and laws and mechanisms for how to battle with this. So that could be something that we see as well in next week.
Yeah, I definitely think there will be a lot of support for something like that. I know we're wary of scaring away tourists, but on the other side, we're looking at enormous state budget shortfalls and city as well. And we didn't even get into all the issues with the rail budget. So I think that having the visitors contribute in some way, given that they are adding this burden to the state, sounds pretty reasonable, and we'll see what lawmakers have to say about that. Thank you so much for all of you who are writing in your questions. And yeah, it's very interesting, Katie. Snyder says, why can movie stars do the testing and not returning residents? I mean, is there a way to administer something similar where if you came back, you could get that double testing and maybe just go to work? This sort of hybrid quarantine is a very interesting concept, and it's the first that I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, some great things. And again, we apologize for some of the technical issues that we sort of ran through at the beginning. We thank all of you for sort of bearing with us and sticking through it. And of course, thank the mayor as well for sort of his patience in this as well. But again, if you miss any part of this, we encourage you to go back and watch some of that. But of course, one of the major headlines that he started off talking about is sort of the reopening of that next phase for Honolulu, and playgrounds as well as exercise gyms and equipment in public places will be open, along with movie theaters and bars. And so he also mentioned that for the bars specifically, that the Liquor Commission will be also monitoring to make sure that some of those social distancing measures are put in place, and that these bars are upholding to some of the laws that set in place, because there was a lot of hesitation, I think, by city and state officials to give that green light, but saying that they will be monitoring the gatherings of these public areas. And again, we'll see what happens over the weekend.
Yeah, that certainly felt like a bit of a warning from the mayor that to let people know that those Liquor Commission folks will be looking at the social distancing and the practices there. Moving on to something we always like to end with, and that, of course, is our Hawaii hero. We showcase all kinds of folks, and this was an interesting submission. On Maui, the YMCA, the Maui Family YMCA, along with Grow Some Good organization in collaborative with Goodfellow Brothers, will be handing out free plants at the Maui YMCA in Kahului. That initiative was born from a need to address food security on the island. So you can see there, they're giving out plants that you can actually, they bear corn or jicama, voila. So there's different plants that they're giving out. And if you wanted to start a garden, this is a great way to start. So we love to see initiatives small and large to help our community. So our Hawaii hero of the day, the Maui Family YMCA, along with Grow Some Good organization and Goodfellow Brothers.
That's right. And thank you for all of you for those Hawaii heroes that you recommend. Again, big or small, we highlight everything from large food banks that feed 4,000 people to even small acts like this that really help to service the community in any way. And really any way that you can help is appreciated, and really something that we need, no matter how small it may seem. All of it can really help to make someone else's life a better by your contribution. So thank you to everybody for doing all that you continue to do to help Hawaii through this tough time. We will be speaking to another special guest tomorrow. We will have Senator Brian Schatz will be joining us here on the program to talk about some of the federal funding that's happening. We know that there has been a big topic, of course, on this platform has been about PPP and those, support for small businesses. A lot of that will be running out. If not, some of them have already expired. And so seeing how the federal government may kick in additional resources and what else is being done on that federal level to help support in sort of this phase 2 as COVID-19 continues to really impact all of us here throughout the country.
Yeah, it's not just money, it's also testing capacity. Is there a way the federal government can help us so that we can get beyond that 5,000 so we could do something like more double testing that the mayor was talking about? So we'll be asking Senator Schatz about all of that, and please do submit your questions. Then, of course, next week we have the governor on every Monday. He's our regular guest on Mondays here. We're going to be talking from someone from the restaurant industry about what it's like to run a restaurant in these tough times and how they're adapting, and how many restaurants we could see go under here in Hawaii. We know that a lot of local businesses can't do all the takeout. And so how is it working now with social distancing? Are people actually coming in and sitting down? We're looking forward to that conversation. And then next Friday, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green joins us, and he is always a popular guest.
That's right. So again, we want to thank, of course, our sponsors, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health, for allowing us the opportunity to have this conversation with all of you. Thank you to the viewers for entering your comments. We know that there were many that, of course, we didn't get to, but we really always appreciate your engagement and your involvement in these discussions. And of course, we will see you right back here at 10:30 with Senator Schatz. Aloha.